Hey folks, welcome to Snowpal Software Development and Architecture Podcast. In this podcast, we're going to talk about diagrams. I'm going to show you some examples of certain diagrams that we use quite frequently at Snowpal, and share my 2 cents on why a pictorial way of representing something or the same thing is actually going to be a lot more effective, no matter how whether or not the diagram is actually pretty. A lot of my diagrams are not particularly pretty, not blessed with the ability to draw, but I use a lot of the digital tools to make up for that to the extent possible, right? I would have loved to have that skill to draw, which is a brilliant skill. I respect artists. I highly respect artists, people who have a lot of those skills. Some of us don't, but we think in diagrammatically, and we want to represent that as best as possible to our teams so they get the gist of it. Now, again, we're going to look at some examples and see how we can use diagrams, maybe some traditionally, maybe some not so traditionally. What I mean by that is, from an engineering standpoint, there's different kinds of diagrams, right? Like class diagrams, sequence diagrams, the list keeps going on and on. You can use them specifically for the purpose that they were originally created for, or you can sort of take them loosely and use them for a variety of different purposes, which is kind of what we do at Snowpal, and it works quite well for us, right? So we're going to look at some diagrams, some examples, and see, how it will makes hopefully some difference. And my hope is you actually, it resonates with you as well. So without further ado, let me share my screen here. Okay, hopefully you can see my screen. Now let's start with, I'm trying to think what we should start with. Okay, actually, I'm going to go to our one of our products, our web app. This is running in a lower environment, so it's got test data, and in an environment which only some of us use. And I've used, a test user. So again, ignore the quality of this data, but I'm just going to show you that, let's say, in our world, keys mean projects or boards or views or spaces or whatnot, right? It's just an entry to whatever it is that, let me make sure I'm actually sharing it. Yes, I am. Yep. So a key is a project. Now I've given it some test names here. One of them is called home. Other one is called, I don't know what PK is. Let's call it college courses. Maybe I'm going to call this taxes, because you might be using it in our product for a variety of different purposes, right? Now we look at it, it looks all right. I mean, this page, this is not necessarily text, so it's not a great example, but let's say if I were to actually write it down, if I opened up Sublime and I said home, taxes, and college courses, this is a exaggerated example, but I'm just telling you this is text, right? I could be socializing this page with somebody, right? Or I can socialize this with somebody, right? I can socialize this page with somebody, which is more colorful and prettier. But let's say if I want to go a step further, if I go to our charts and I just go to one of our first charts, I go expand keys. It tells me what those keys are: home, taxes, and then I can, maybe if there's more data, I can expand this. Now this is actually it's what is it, a mind map, right? I guess it is a mind map, slightly a different kind of mind map, but it is a mind map. So this is much prettier, right? We had 3 steps. One is we wrote the text on Sublime, and then we saw it here on the page, and then we went one step further, and we actually seeing this here. So this is just a simple example of how a picture is going to resonate better with a lot of us, right? With the majority of the population. And so far, I might have just simply stated the obvious. If I did, my apologies to you, but I actually want to set the foundation and give some context. With that, I'm going to say that that's one of the reasons why we have plenty of charts in our own products, right? Whether you're using our APIs to power your systems, our backends as services, or you're using our B2C products, you'll see that we have plenty of support for charts because we love diagrams and pictures. But in this podcast, I want to cover primarily or almost exclusively from this point onwards, how you can use diagrams to communicate within your teams, right? Within your whatever team, whether it's whether you're a product company like us, or a services company, or some other non-software company. I think you want to have images and diagrams, be a richer part of the artifacts and documents you're sharing with your team members, because it's going to linger in their minds. And even if they forgot everything that was written, the diagram is going to actually resonate for a lot longer. They're not going to forget it. At least that's what we have seen. So we're going to take a couple of diagrams and then go, draw them up. And you can either draw every aspect of the diagram yourself, and takes a fair bit of time, or you can use tools and DSL and other code to diagram platforms or tools, if you will, to actually create those diagrams, which is going to make it a whole lot more productive. And that's literally how we do things at Snowpal. Now let's take a diagram. This is a sequence diagram, and then we're gonna, again, like I said earlier, we're gonna I'm gonna take a reasonably generic example. I think I have to go back to see what I jotted down there, and it may not be the most conventional use of these diagrams, but that's literally the idea, to tell you that you can use them in the most conventional manner possible. But in addition to it, you can and probably should also use that everywhere else you find value in it. And this is a workflow diagram. Maybe this is a good one to start out with, right? So let's start with the workflow diagram. I'm going to say this is code to flow. Look it up. It's actually pretty cool. We use that. So I'm going to say title, right? Okay, this is prospecting. At Snowpal, for APIs, we went live last year, towards the latter part of last year, and we've started to prospect, early days again. And I'm going to share some of just take that as a simple example to tell you how you can actually draw a diagram. So that's based, let's say we have, the first thing is, hang on, is this, no, I think I'm taking the wrong one here. This is not the workflow. This is actually the sequence. You know what, let's start with the sequence then. Let's go this. Okay, Snowpal API prospecting. And imagine we can write this up as text and theory and socialize it with the sales teams. You can imagine how, in my mind, at least my opinion, how boring that might be if they have to read just the words. If you're reading a book, it's something entirely different in my mind, right? You're reading, Jeffrey Archer or Tom Clancy, it's different, right? You're not expecting pictures, and pictures could actually be intrusive, to be honest. But outside of that, I cannot think of any other situation where diagrams don't actually add more value in lieu of words, right? At least that's for the most part. Okay, so I'm gonna socialize how a simple, trivialized version of our prospecting process with you, right? And how can I do it? I can write up a document and do that. Let me make sure I'm still recording. Yep, we are. Okay, where were we? Yep, do that by socializing a boring document, or draw something up and draw that manually or using a tool. So here, oops, what happened? Oh, okay, you know what? This is gonna fix itself. Yep. No tool is perfect. This one is good, and you'll see that the title adjusts itself as the image grows here. So we're going to create two participant groups. One is the first one's called Apollo, which is a tool we kind of use, but not a whole lot for prospecting. It's a sales automation tool. It works all right, but given everything that's changing in the coming months, in any sales automation tool, from what I've seen, the majority of your emails don't even reach the prospects. Much like, I get so many emails a day and it ends up in junk. There's always a small percentage of those emails that are actually valuable. Unfortunately, they get lost in the context of everything else that you receive, and they don't end up in our inboxes as well, which is a similar challenge we have, because our APIs are going to save you time, money, effort, and everything else in getting your solutions to market sooner. But you're probably getting like 25 other emails that are unrelated to what you're doing. They are literally spam. So unfortunately, all of them end up in the junk folder. And starting, I think, next month, with Google and Microsoft cracking down on that, more and more of these are going to end up. So you're going to have to do prospecting in a very creative manner, add value, create content, do content marketing, build relationships, and so on and so forth. But let's say you're still using automation. That's participant group number one. And the second participant group is cherry picking prospects, say using LinkedIn Sales Navigator, right? We use that, we use that more and more, given the automation tools are not, we're not fancying them as much. We spend an hour, maybe two sometimes, identifying one prospect and then try to reach out to the prospect and then keep our fingers crossed that they find value and I reach out and connect. Some do, some don't. It's natural because, you go by what you read, you do all your research and analysis, but it still might be different from what that company is doing. So it's quite understandable. But the idea is to be more and more specific and picky, and then you reach out, right? So that's our, say, prospecting through LinkedIn Sales Navigator. That's the second participant group. Now let's look at the first one. I'm going to copy. I wrote this up because I could have done it real time, which is kind of what we do most of our podcasts, if not all of them. But this one, I actually took a 20-25 minutes to write this up because I had a feeling that if I did that real time, I would just be completely manufacturing some of this. And I did not want the value of this diagramming to be lost in that, which is why I've done this, which is a little bit unusual to our usual approach and process. Okay, I put my name there. Say I'm one of the sales engineers in the team. I'm going to be focused on automated prospecting, using an automated sales tool for that. That's what I mean there. Uh, this again, you can look up their help, right? If you go to sequencediagram.org, where is this? You can look up, they have beautiful, simple documentation. It has a diagram and some text, and you can figure out what works for you, what makes the most sense for the problem that you're actually trying to represent. We use this in different contexts for different problems, more than for traditional sequences, right? So their documentation is pretty good. So I highly recommend sequencediagram.org. So let's say now I say Krish, this one is basically the angle of this, right? So if I don't have the one, you'll see it'll be a straight line. Oops. How did I delete too much there? If I remove the one, keep an eye on this first arrow there, you'll see it becomes straight, right? That's all there is to it. It's just the angle. So the first is create sequence steps, email templates, activate sequence, and do whatnot, right? I'm just, you're not going to get into the details of sales automation. If you have an interest in knowing what that entails and how the tool works, let me know. I'll be more than happy to do a podcast. We'll be happy to do a podcast on that as well. Okay, so there are 4 steps, right? And if you want to make add the step here, you can say 1, 2, 3, and then 4. And then, this is a participant group. I added color. If you don't want color, you can always remove that. Okay, so that's, now you're starting to see the Krish is the salesperson. I have to create a sequence steps, email templates, activate sequence, and do whatnot. I'm just trivializing it, but let's say there's only 4 steps to sales automation, which is not the case. So this diagram is going to become more and more complex if you were actually going to truly complete this. But the idea for this podcast is not the completeness of this diagram, but the idea is to communicate the value of diagrams as a whole, right? Okay, so that's the second part. Now let's say, let me add this one line here. This is in this other direction, and the 2 dashes mean you have dotted lines. So it says Apollo to Krish, most emails bounce, right? That's literally what happens. So that's, I'm just trying to capture that here, just trying to tell you the arrows up, and it's bidirectional, and there's some nuances and, small differences. If I make this, it's, solid, otherwise it's dotted, most emails bounce. And then I'm going to add a note. Is it even worth it? Is sales automation even worth it, right? And if I say note, it prompts you. You can actually say note to note left off. If I change over, let me delete this and make this left off. You will see, where is that? Maybe there is no, oh, hang on. I did something wrong here. Note. That looks all right. So let me try it again. That's interesting. Let's try left of Krish, Apollo, blah. Okay, so that's not working. So we can go to the help here and say search for left of. It says note to the left of D. Okay, I think left of should just have one and not two maybe. There you go. Right, note to the left of Krish, and you can say note right of Krish as well. Right, so it prompts you and gives you some help as you type. It does the completion, right? The code completion, if you will. So that's note over. Is it even worth it? Now, this diagram, you can already tell probably at this point where it's starting to make sense. It's a lot more attractive than writing this up in a document as bullets and bulleted points. But let's keep going, right? Let's keep going, see this in totality. I'm going to add a few more. I'm going to add, for the next participant, I'm going to say, Krish, create search filters and extensively research prospect. Those are the things I mentioned, right? It could take plenty of time to find the best, identify your prospects based on your ideal customer profile. So this is, I've chosen a different color, light blue, and it's in this direction. Krish to LinkedIn Sales Navigator. I'm going to add a note on top of that. Yep, it takes a significant amount of time, and it's going to be in yellow. It's a note over Krish and LinkedIn Sales Navigator. That's why you see the note overlapping both those sections. Now let's keep going. Let's add 2 more lines to it and see what those lines are. Krish to Slack, say, okay, once you prospect and identify those, I'm saying you want to save a list of those promising prospects. We do that on Slack also as an example. And then Slack to Krish's review categorize prospects one by one, which is, once you save those prospects as you identify them, you're going to review them, because you're going to save a list of prospects. Maybe you prospect on day 1 or session 1, and you don't, you find out and identify the prospects, and then you later reach out to those prospects. So let's say you save those prospects on Slack. At a later point, you're going to review the prospects and then take one by one and find a way to reach out to those prospects, right? So that's those 2 steps that's mentioned there. Now let's go to Alt. So Alt is another feature that this tool supports, and you'll see what it looks like. Alt is basically a section. You can have any title here, right? You can have a title. And it says Krish, and these are colors, purple, violet, and whatnot, dark blue. Krish to, this is the syntax, right? Krish to, you put the color, hashtag color, and then the arrow. If you don't want the color, it'll look like how it did earlier, right? It's going to be black by default. Krish to LinkedIn Sales Navigator, this section I'm going to say send email or send a connection request, do one or the other, and then you wait for it, right? Wait for a response back from your prospect. That's Alt is basically you creating a section to say, whatever that categorization is, right? This is basically establishing connection, right? That could be that section. That's what Alt represents. Now let's keep going here. I'm going to add one more Alt. This one is outcome. Here it says Krish to prospect, follow up with the prospect. Maybe they haven't responded yet. Maybe they connected, but they haven't said anything. So you follow up with the prospect. The prospect's going to ask questions. Prospect to Krish, they're going to ask questions about Snowpal API. We clarify the prospect's questions. They're convinced that this is the way they want to go because they're going to save a lot of time and money by leveraging APIs. And then we clarify and we close the deal, right? It's not as simple as this, to be very honest with you, but let's just make it simple, in an ideal scenario, right? At least for the purposes of this diagram. So that's what this diagram looks like. Now, again, you can look at the documentation. You can do a lot more things. And once you get used to it, it'll be pretty quick. And when you're writing the DSL here, but now you created this diagram. There is a way to actually export this. Let's say you want to export the diagram as SVG or a PNG image, and you download this, right? And then I can open the diagram here, and there you go. Right now, what you can do is you can socialize this diagram with your team, or you get on a presentation and talk about it. Say, hey, you know what? We used a sales automation tool. We're switching gears to like using Sales Navigator and doing cherry-picked prospecting. These are the challenges. This is the approach. This is what we're going to do. I took an example for prospecting, and I could have shown you the same thing for implementing a feature or fixing a more complicated bug, even a bug, socializing a new idea with the team, whatever it is that you're doing, whether it's internal or external. Now, if you drew this in other fancier tools, maybe the diagrams, I don't disagree, they're going to look prettier, possibly. But there's always a fine line between how pretty, right? Don't let the perfect come in the way of the good. If you're socializing with your external client who actually places a lot of value in the visual aspects of how something looks than the content of that material, then you take a different approach. Maybe use a different tool or just hand draw the diagrams using a tool, but draw them, like draw these boxes literally. Or if you have a rapport with the client, or it's an internal conversation you're having for productivity purposes, you can go with this. And I promise you, I've done this internally, externally, and I haven't heard anyone tell me otherwise. They've like, people are generally happy if you're productive and efficient, and you can get the things done well in quick time. And there are cases where you want things to be prettier. I don't disagree, but not always the case. That's one diagram, right? So hopefully that gave you an idea as to how we can actually write DSL quickly and draw diagrams. And now, once you get used to the tool and the syntax, you're going to be able to generate this in real quick time, a whole lot quicker than if you were to draw these diagrams using actual tools. I have to draw and shape these boxes and whatnot, right? Okay, so almost 20 minutes in. Let's use the remaining, trying to keep these to a half hour to the extent possible. Some of the podcasts, we're covering a lot more items. It's a lot more complex. So it needs the time, and sometimes we're just coding, so it's going to take longer. But in this case, in cases where I can try to keep it to a half hour, I'm trying my honest, making my best attempt at doing so. Hopefully you would agree with that. Okay, so that's one diagram. Let's go to the next one. Code to flow. Now, let's say you want to draw workflows. You don't want to fit a square peg in a round hole, right? So you can represent everything in the same diagram. So you want to pick the best diagram, or the closest diagram that makes the most sense for that to represent that problem, and you go with that diagram. So in this case, as an example, I'm going to go with, I'm going to show you how to draw a flow chart. Maybe it's not the most conventional flow chart. Again, the idea here is to tell you how you can use these diagrams to solve a variety of problems and to do a different different types of communications with different stakeholders. You could do all of them diagrammatically. That's the idea. Okay, so let's start here. Start with begin. Here, semicolon is actually, sometimes you can end without it, but I recommend you do it because I think I've run into issues where I don't. I think they expect for it to happen. Okay, so we begin. Let me copy the first section. I've given, let's say I reckon this one is about taking our product as an example and just showcasing how you can communicate some of the features or the user experience to a stakeholder. That's the manufactured example. We'll see. Challenge use of credentials. That's the first thing, because you need to sign in, right? You need to get out here. However you sign in, whether using social media, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, or Apple, or a traditional email-based sign-in, you need to sign in, right? That's one of the first things you're doing. Sign up, and after you sign up, you're signing in. Excuse me. So challenge user for, excuse me, a second. This is my second podcast of the morning, so I've been talking and talking. Apologies for that minor interruption. So challenge user for credentials. If this is again, it looks very much, right? This is DSL, but it looks different from this. So you just need to get used to the syntax that each of these tools support, essentially the DSL. So if I remove the not, you'll see the condition change from true to false. I did not write or draw this manually, right? So if the login is not valid, then you go back and challenge them. So which is why we put the loop here, and it says we gave it a name, a label called login. So we want to put them back at that point of time. So you want to take them back to challenging for credentials, which is why we have a label called login. And then we say if not valid, loop. Similar to the other one, they have beautiful documentation here as well. So you can go through that documentation. It's pretty nice. You can click through each of those sections. It'll take you and you can look at it and see what makes the most sense to you and get used to that syntax and the DSL and use that DSL to represent whatever it is that you're representing. So one more time, code to flow, that documentation is pretty good as well. Okay, so you go there. If it's not valid, you keep challenging them. But if it is valid, if the login is valid, you redirect them to the dashboard, which is what we do, right? When the user logged in, we redirected them to the dashboard. And this is a comment. It says dashboard shows the summary. That's all this is doing. So you can type that and it shows it this way as like sort of an info or a message. Let's keep going. The next one I have here is a switch statement. I'm going to take a switch statement. Okay, let me do an empty switch here. Okay, once you're redirected to the dashboard, where does the user want to go? Do they want to go to notifications or do they want to go to conversations? I'm just taking, again, trivializing this, right, to keep it simple. Maybe they want to go to notification of conversations, or they're on the dashboard, they want to go to notifications, for instance, right? So this is again test data. So ignore all of the information. You might be, if you're wondering, why does it show 13 when there is only 1? It's fake data. We're working on something where we've actually updated it on the database side for whatever reason. So ignore the numbers that you see here, but this is notification. So if you want me to show you the correct version of it for what it's worth, let's say if I go to an incognito window, I go to snowpal.com, which is the production version, by the way. I'm going to log in. And then if I go to notifications, I'll have a list of notifications. I have no unread notifications. Just to tell you that this number is a fake number that we've plugged in for testing something. So anyways, that's a digression. So you can either go to you want to go to notifications or conversations, and we want to represent that here on the diagram. And here's what we do. We have a switch statement that says, where does user want to go? Do they want to go to notifications or conversations? You have this double arrow and there's an empty. If it's one line, you don't need any flower brackets, but if it's multiple lines, you need show key details. There's a third case part of the switch as part of the switch statement, but it doesn't show up there because I didn't add any text. I'm going to add it shortly. I'm going to say show key. I'm actually going to copy everything in here. Then we'll review it. Okay. Oops. Selected a key. The third is showing key details. The user either goes to conversations or notifications or selects a key. If they select a key, and again, when you highlight this, you'll notice that it actually takes you to that piece of code. Actually, that's quite convenient. You can have it not do that as well, I think. Yep, you can choose not to. This is different on following the editor cursor, right? This is different from that. But anyways, you see that it actually reflects it. So it's very convenient to make changes. And when you have a big diagram, you can really quickly switch back and forth between the editor on the left and the diagram on the right. Which tab inside the key? Where do they want to go? Once they go into a key, let's say home, which tab do they want to go to? Which of these 5 tabs do they actually want to go to? That's what we're trying to show here, blogs, pods, or charts. And we have a piece of text that explains that: show blogs, show pods, and show charts. When they go into a block, do they want to add a block? Yes, if they want to add a block, you see that statement says if add a block. Else you can create an else statement. I'm not going to do that here for now. You can look up the documentation. You can actually search for else. Let's do it at this level. Else. Right, this is how your expression is going to look like. If something is true, else, very standard if else statement. So this DSL, the idea is you probably don't even have to learn how some of these tools do it, because they use standard languages and programming constructs to a fair extent. So you can be presumptuous about it and try it. And if it doesn't work, then you can come back and look at the help. That's what we do actually to help us move forward quickly. If there's no false here for whatever, for ease of having this conversation. So you add a block, it's true. You ask for a name, because that's what we do here. When you go to add a block, you say, I know, lunchtime, just a random piece of text. It's the name of the block, and we added it. So make it, an API call is made, and then you're redirected, to the block. Actually, you're not in this case. You stay there and you have to click to get into the block. So this text would actually need to change. So you're not redirected. You're going to say verify block creation, something like that. So you see that that's this path of traversal. Show pods has nothing going on. Show chats has nothing going on at this point of time. So let's see if we have something else at the end here. We just have sign out and end. I'm going to say sign out and end. Obviously, this is a very, very simple manufactured flowchart. The idea here, as I've mentioned a few times earlier, is to try to understand how you can quickly draw diagrams by writing some DSL. That way you're not spending enough. Imagine if you were to draw this diagram by actually using a tool where you had to drag and drop these objects and create these arrows. It is going to certainly take a whole lot longer, right? For most of us at least. By virtue of doing something like this, by using these tools, you can generate diagrams in quick time. Everything we try to do at Snowpal is we try to do things quickly, and we try to provide options and solutions and offerings to help you solve your problems quickly as well, which is literally why we have these n number of APIs published on the marketplace, on AWS Marketplace, for you to start building your solutions and going to market in quick time. So it'd be hypocritical of us if we provided that for other people and didn't take every opportunity to do things quicker when we do it. So we do literally that. We actually do everything as quickly as we possibly can, given what we actually have as resources, time, money, and whatnot. So that's one diagram. And now you can actually export this diagram. Let's do that. We can share this. We can download it. You can pick a PNG or an SVG format or even PDF. You download that and it creates it, right? I know it has a darker background here, but anyway, so it creates a diagram, and now you can socialize the diagram, add that to your documents or do a presentation and whatnot. And then how quick was that? So kudos to the two teams, Code to Flow and sequencediagram.org, for actually supporting these fantastic tools. And one of the last podcasts, we talked about digital analysis. We used one other tool, which was basically mind map, right? We did not create the mind map. We used Mark Map. You can go to Mark Map to actually check it out. Or you can use like a VS Code, extension as well. That's what we had used in that particular podcast. That's also quite nice. Mark Map. You can write a markdown and it converts it to a mind map. We use markdowns quite a bit, and we use mind maps quite a bit. And it was a while ago, we were like, how can we actually generate it? So we want to write something ourselves to try to make this happen. But before you do anything, before you reinvent the wheel, always look to see if there is a solution out there. Because if you identify a problem, it's likely that somebody else has identified that. Maybe they've solved it differently, unless it's disruptive, of course. And if there isn't a solution, that's when we want to start building your own solutions. Otherwise, you'd be reinventing the wheel for no good reason. Now, you can use a VS Code plugin, or you can do it on the browser. And if you do it on the browser, they have this interactive HTML that you can download and then socialize and share. and it looks very, very pretty, as you can tell. This is their example. But what we had used in the previous podcast was we talked digital analysis, and we actually used created some text. Let me go delete it, paste it, and there you go, right? And then if you download that as HTML, you're going to see what this is. Go back and look at the digital analyst podcast 2 of 2, where we spent about a half hour talking about digital analysis and the tools used by digital analysts, and how we can take something that you have and offer that to the product team for them to make certain decisions. And we use this diagram quite heavily. That's one more example. So in this podcast, I would say we have 3 diagrams. We see a mind map here, markmap.js, we saw code to flow, and we saw for workflows, and then sequence diagram for sequences. That's just to tell you how diagrams can and will help you be more productive, and how people will actually have. I cannot think of one person who hasn't taken a liking to the diagrams that we've shared with them, as simple as they have been, because after 2 minutes, they understand what it is that we are trying to tell, and we can get the conversation started, whatever the purpose of the conversation is for to begin with. And which is why we have our own diagrams as well. And we go use our products, our APIs. If you go to our endpoints, let's say you go to, I don't know, blocking, building blocks. If you go to Postman and you go to check out the APIs and our endpoints, if you go to chats, you'll see a lot of different kinds of chats. We have like key chats and block chats and whatnot. So let's say if I go to key chats, these are all the key chats, right? The endpoints you can use to generate, to persist data that and use that response to actually render chats in really, really quick time. So we support this as offering. So we use other chats to, like the ones I had shown, the diagrams internally, to make us more productive, and we provide those chats to make you more productive as well. That's basically it for this podcast. Hopefully, some of this resonates with you. If you've not checked out these tools, I highly recommend that you do so. Check out the tools that we've shared. Check out our products as well, and make yourself more productive than you, I'm sure, already are at this point. With that, I'm going to end this podcast. Talk to you soon. Thank you.